Welcome to episode 3 of the UWF ACM Snappy software series. This episode we're going to change gears from setting up databases to mobile app development. Don't worry though, the databases set up earlier will be utilized by your mobile apps in future episodes. For now though, we're just going to start with the bare basic of installing an IDE. The one we'll be working with this series is Android Studio. An IDE specifically designed for making Android applications, as you can tell by the name. When you go to their download page, they should present you with the version you need for your current operating system. If not though, you can always go to their options and pick whichever one you want. For me, it'll be the Windows 64-bit version. Make sure you read the whole terms and service before downloading, and then wait for it to download. Alright, so after it's finished downloading, you're going to go ahead and just run it. Eventually, Windows will ask you, you sure you want to run it? Go ahead and hit yes. We'll then ask you, are you very sure you want this to run? You're going to hit yes again. And then once Windows is absolutely certain that you want this, the helpful download wizard will. So now you're going to go ahead and hit next. Very important, make sure you have Android virtual device clicked. It will add another gigabyte to the installation space, but it will help a lot, especially if you don't actually have an Android, like a physical Android device in your house. You can set the default path to whatever you want, and then whether or not you want to start menu shortcut, obviously. You go ahead and let it install. You just hit next when it's done, then finish starting Android Studio. So once Android Studio is finished starting up, you'll get to this screen. You may not have any projects over here, but that's only because I've been messing with it before. For this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and hit Create New Project. Bring up this little picker thing here. We're going to make sure we're under Phone and Tablet and Empty Activity. Go ahead and hit Next. We're going to call this Snappy Software. Snappy Software first. You can call it whatever you want. We are in fact going to be working in Kotlin. It's a kind of a derivative of Java, specifically meant for working in Android Studio. If you worked with Java before, it'll be easier to learn, but if you haven't worked with any of Java or any programming at all, don't worry. Well, this app will be super simple, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along and learn a bit on the way. This part is important. The minimum SDK is pretty much the lowest version of Android that this app will be designed to run on. So the lower you go, the less features you'll have access to, but the more devices will be able to run it, as you can see here. So if you pick the lowest, then almost every single device on the planet can run it, or if you pick the highest, almost none of the devices can run it. But this one has things that the older versions will not be able to do. For now, we're going to go and just pick this one. It doesn't, for this app, we're not going to be doing anything crazy, so we don't really need any newer features. And it'll be nice to just have it be able to run on a lot of devices. We're going to go ahead and hit finish, and we'll begin building our project. Get a nice little tip of the day. Go ahead and ignore these if you never want to see them again, but I kind of like them. And we for sure don't need the installer anymore, so you can go ahead and delete it, and close out the download one. So after about a year or so, depending on how fast your computer is, Android Studio will finish building your project, and we can get to work making your first app. There's one more thing though that I want to go over before we get started, and that's setting up an emulator for you to be able to run and test your app on. If you have an Android device at home, you can use that by just plugging it into your computer. Android Studio will automatically detect it. But since not everyone will have that option, I'll quickly go over how to set up a virtual Android device. I also recommend following these steps because if we're all working on the same emulator, it'll guarantee that any bugs I run across due to version errors we can work on together. Whereas if you're working on your own physical device or a different kind of emulator, there's no guarantee that the software we're running will work. Though it definitely should. We're not going to do anything crazy. Alright, to make that new emulator, we're going to go to AVD Manager. It'll pull up a list of all your current emulators you may or may not have. It might have some default ones. We're going to go to Create New Emulator. We're going to search up Pixel 2. There it is. This is the model of phone we'll be emulating. And we're going to use which version of Android we want to run on that phone. We're going to use Pi. You may have to download this system image. And to do that, you would just click the download link, make sure you read the whole terms of service, all of it. Then go to Next, and it'll start downloading automatically. After that, you'll be able to name your virtual device, whether you want it set up in landscape or portrait mode. This isn't a permanent change, it's just which one you want default. And everything else, you can pretty much leave all of this default for what we're going to do. Then you'll hit finish. But since I already have one created, I'm just going to be using that. Now, one more important thing is that your computer might not be set up to run virtual Android devices. To do so, you might have to go into your BIOS. To access your BIOS, you have to restart your computer, and while it's starting up, it might tell you to put in a key. This could be anything from like F12 to delete to home. It's different for every motherboard, I believe. And also the menu you will be going through is also different, so I cannot show you the exact process, but you'll be looking for a option to enable virtualization. If you have an especially older computer, you might not even have this option available to you, in which case you'll have to use a physical Android device or find a possible workaround online. But for most machines these days, it should be available. So once you're done setting up virtualization, you can double check that you've done so by going to your task manager, performance, CPU, and then there's a virtualization indicator here. This one. Once it says enabled, then you're good to go. Then you can start by hitting play on the device, and it'll go through its little boot up sequence. It'll likely take a lot longer for your device to start up since it'll be the first time you're running it. But after that, eventually you will get to this screen. Once you get here, you can now begin testing your app. So if you hit play up over here, it'll actually build and then run your app on the emulator you chose. It'll take a little bit to build your app and get it installed onto the emulator, but you can keep an eye on the progress down here, this little indicator. And eventually your app will be ran on the phone. As you can see, if you go to all the apps available on the phone by clicking and dragging up here, and then scrolling down, you can see that Snappy software is actually installed on the phone along with any other projects you may be working on that emulator. Now right now it doesn't do very much, but we'll be soon fixing that once we actually get into editing the code over here. I recommend leaving the emulator running in the background because starting it up every time you want to test something can get very tedious. Alright, so now that we have the app actually running on the phone, let's actually make it do something. You may have noticed that it has this little hello world text here. Now, in case you're wondering where that's actually coming from, it's coming from if you go to Resources, Layout, ActivityMain.xml, you get to this little file. If you want to get to this view successfully, you might start out here. There's these three little things up here. You can go to Split, Design, or Code. We're going to be sticking with Code mostly for this. So this is a XAML file for explaining how the app will look. We'll go into detail about XAML and why these are called activities and whatnot later, but for now, just know that pretty much what we do in here will affect what comes out on the screen. So for example, if we change Hello World into Hello Marvin, and then we rerun the app, pull up the emulator again, it'll say, once it finishes building, the good old build process, you'll get Hello Marvin. This is a good start for an app, but it's not really what we want. I'm going to change this constraint layout to a linear layout, and I'm going to add these attributes to it. Android gravity, center, and Android orientation, vertical. Pretty much this will go from being a constraint layout, which requires all these various parameters for every single one of your objects, to just being something that will stack objects one on top of another. So we can get rid of all this. And now our text view will still appear just fine, just in the center of the screen. In fact, now if we put multiple of them on there, now we have several Hello Marvins. We run again. Terminate the app process, and eventually it'll finish. We have all these Hello Marvins stacked on top of each other. And if you want to just quickly check on what views will look like, you can also go to design here, and it'll show you this is what it'll look like once you actually render it on the screen, instead of having to run through the old emulator every time. But we don't actually want this many text views. In fact, we don't want any text views. No, instead what we're going to do, so we're going to be making a new element called edit text. Just like that. We're going to want to wrap content. And that's it for now. So, if you run the app now, terminate the process, you can hit it to not ask you again eventually. Instead, now your app will have this little thing, and if you click on it, you can actually type in there. And so this will be how our user will actually interact with our app. Now what the end goal of our app will be is that we're going to type something in here. There's going to be a little button here, and when you click that button, it'll send a little notification to your phone with whatever you typed in. Just from some simple input-output for right now, for the first app. So, but obviously now we have to add a button here. We want to be able to click that so the user can actually send the notification. So to add a button, literally just add a button like that. It's going to grab its content, and just like that. Now if you run the app again, or check in design, we have a little button here. Now it's blank, so it doesn't really indicate to the user what exactly it does, but so in order to fix that, we can go to Android text, just say submit, and if we run that, you can see now we have a little submit button. Now clearly it doesn't do anything when you click on it, but we will fix that in just a moment. So the submit button doesn't actually do anything when you click on it, and the information you type in doesn't actually go anywhere whenever you type it in. So how do we fix that? Is now we actually want to be able to reference these things in our code over here. In order to do so, we're going to add IDs to them. So to add an ID to an element, we're going to go spell Android, right? Android ID at plus ID slash. So what this is saying is that I'm adding an ID to this element, and the ID is going to be called, for this, we're going to call it user text. And then here, we have another one, Android ID at plus ID submit button. So what these IDs will actually allow us to do is reference these actual elements inside our code. So now if we go over here, type in private late init var user text, that'll be an edit text. Then if you do private late init var submit button, that'll be his type button. Now I'll go over what private late init var and the override function and onCreate and all this jazz in future episodes. For now though, we're just going to get an app running. Now we're actually going to tie these variables to their components. So user text equals find view by ID r.id dot user text, and submit button equals find view by ID r.id dot submit button. So now these will actually equal the edit text from our thing and the button from our thing. So now we actually want to tell what happens when you click on the submit button. So submit button dot set on click listener. You actually want to use curly braces for this, just like that. And so now we're telling it whenever the button's clicked, run this little block of code. And so what we want to do is send a little message to the user that with the text that they've submitted. In Android, we call the little notifications that you can get toasts. So in order to make a toast, do toast.text to make a text-based toast. You give it a context of this. The actual text we'll be using is user's text.text. That'll be the text that the user's inputted. And then you give it how long you want the toast to show for. So you're going to give it toast.length, and we'll go ahead and just be short since the toast, there shouldn't be that much text. So, .show for actually playing the toast. Now, if you run your app one more time, you type in, hi, how are you? Hit submit. You'll actually get a little notification here saying, hi, how are you? Now you've officially made your very first app. It doesn't do very much, but with some tweaking, you might be able to make something cool out of it. In the future, we'll actually go over exactly why all this works the way it does, what all this various syntax means, how to read XAML files to properly use them, and then possibly also how to go over the design screens so you can actually fine tweak your thing and make it look all pretty. For now though, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and feel free to leave a comment if you have any specific questions on what to do, and look forward to the next episode.